Hi, I'm Georgia Lennon and I'm continuing on with our Family Law Alphabet series, this time speaking about words starting with the letter M. So this week we're talking about the words mediation and marriage. So mediation, this is one of my absolute favourite things to do as part of a family law matter. And in any area of law actually, mediation applies. So it's a form of what we call alternative dispute resolution. So in effect what that means is when you think of dispute resolution, generally that's going to court, and it's not anymore, it's changed. People engage in all these different types of alternative ways to resolve their dispute. So we've spoken about earlier arbitration, conciliation conferences and things like that, but mediation is one of those other forms. So it's best known essentially for where you would have yourself and maybe a lawyer. You don't always have to have a lawyer as part of this process. The other side and their lawyer, or not, and a mediator. So a mediator is someone trained in resolving disputes and working through the issues. So what in effect happens as part of that process, and it depends upon your mediator and what's involved of course, but is both sides set out their positions and what they want. The mediator then works through those positions and says, well, how about you consider this? And both parties put their case forward as to why they think they should get what they should get. But also, in my view, it tends to factor in a little bit more of the practicalities of the situation. So you're saying, well, look, if I want the house, how am I going to maintain the house whilst you get enough as part of the settlement as well? Or what about the kids? Let's work through the issues in relation to that. So it allows that more open dialogue. And I really think that that's beneficial because it allows you to craft your own agreement, unlike in court proceedings where it is judge ordered. The judge doesn't know you, doesn't know your family other than what you've written on paper. And sometimes it's not necessarily the best decision that's made for either party and no one really wins. So if you have the opportunity as part of a matter to be involved in mediation, I would always recommend it. So another thing on mediation just really quickly is that in parenting matters, before you can actually commence proceedings in court, you're required to engage in what's called family dispute resolution. Now, I tend to think of this like a mediation, and usually this is conducted at services such as Interrelate Relationships Australia, so they are government-funded bodies and tend to do this for free for parties, which I think is a fantastic service. However, you can also do it through private family dispute resolution practitioners. And often, because those other services are government funded, there tend to be delays. If you go through a private practitioner, it's much quicker. So what their role is in resolving the parenting issues. Now, if they're unable to do that, they'll issue you what's called a Section 60I certificate, and thereafter you'll be able to commence proceedings in court. But you must attempt that prior to commencing proceedings in court, subject to exceptions such as urgency, significant risk, and so forth. Now, the other part of mediation can be during the court process. So often with my clients at least, we'll engage in that as part of the court process as well. And if you haven't engaged in it, the court will generally always make you go and do it. And as part of the processes such as conciliation conferences and things like that, that in many respects are very similar to a mediation, it just has a different name. If you were fortunate enough to have some form of legal aid funding in your matter, whether it is a party that's legally aided or an independent children's lawyer, you can sometimes have what's called legal aid mediations. Same thing in that it is a mediation. It's just that it tends to be a little bit cheaper because legal aid assists in the funding for that process. Another really great option is what's called the Family Law Settlement Service. So if you've been ordered to attend mediation and you don't have the funds to be able to pay for a private mediator, you can go to the Family Law Settlement Service. And whilst, yes, you do have to pay, the fee is quite nominal compared to the fees that you would pay as part of the private mediation process generally. So that's mediation, always recommended. If you have any questions, please contact our team. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about really briefly is marriage. So marriage is becoming, in my view, less and less relevant and necessary for family law matters. Of course, it's relevant in the sense that the minute you're married, the court has jurisdiction to deal with matters, but they also have jurisdiction before that if you've been in a de facto relationship. But marriage, in its legal terms, is the legal recognition of your relationship and of you coming together. So it can now be here in Australia between any gender. You don't have to be a man and a woman to be married here in Australia, and it has to be conducted in a certain way. So you have to, for example, prior to your marriage, ensure that you provide a notice of intention to marry 28 days before, that as part of your ceremony or process you have proper identification provided, you have witnesses, and that there's no duress or other influences. So here in Australia, we do have legal requirements with respect to marriage. It can't just be that you say, oh, we're married now. So sometimes issues arise in relation to someone not being validly married. Rare instances generally, and often it occurs with respect to Australia not recognising perhaps overseas marriages. However, it does occur, and if that is something that is concerning for you or someone that you know, you should definitely contact a lawyer in relation to that. Those are my brief summaries of words starting with the letter M that I think are most relevant to family law matters, and I'll speak to you next time about words starting with the letter N. Thanks.